Welcome to the Thriving Artist Podcast, where we share strategies and support for artists to thrive.
We know that the art world can feel like a lonely place, and we want to provide a network of support, impactful strategies, and an abundance of encouragement to help you grow your authentic art career.
We're your hosts. I'm Jamie Smith.
And I'm Kaylan Butine, and we are also the co-founders of the Thrive Together Network, a community of female and non-binary identifying artists and artists who are caregivers.
We truly believe in community over competition, and we're so glad you're here. Enjoy this episode.
Hi there. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Artist Podcast. This is week 1 of our virtual art residency program. And if you missed our earlier sign up and want to hop in to an amazing group of artists making a bunch of work in the studio this month, head to thrivetogethernetwork.com to learn how to join us today. I don't want you to miss out. I am one of your hosts, Kaylan Butine, and I'm planning to make small works for an upcoming market sale during this month's art residency.
And I'm Jamie Smith. I'm your other host, and I am going to make 3 large drawings that are all based on this idea of waiting rooms during this month. So I'm really excited to dive in. Seeing as we are all abuzz with art residency inspiration, we thought it was a perfect time to bring you an episode about how to plan out your studio time. As you know, Kaylan and I love a good plan.
We love it.
I'm sure you're not surprised that now we're moving the plans right into studio time. But we actually haven't heard a lot of people talk about this. And as we really thought through this episode, having a plan for studio time is so important, and you're probably already doing a lot of the things naturally that we're going to talk about in this episode. But for me, this was just such a good reminder of best practices and ways to bring this into the studio.
Yeah.
So why don't you start us with number 1 about this and being intentional and how it can really help us in our studio?
I'm clearly just so excited, Jamie. I love this idea of
you're jumping right in.
I know, bringing the plan into the studio.
We're all lit. We have a planning glow. We're so excited.
So the first step in how to plan out your studio time is to name what matters most. So this is about prioritization. Because prioritizing is really key to spending our studio time in a way that is fruitful and nourishing to us as artists. Putting in a few minutes to think through what matters to us right now can actually ease up some of that mental stress, that messy mental brain that we can have as artists in the studio when we're in there and we're trying to make our important work, right? So, for example, I might have a lot on my artist's plate. I might be making work for a group show. I might have a collaboration project that I'm doing with another artist. I might have a commission that, I need to wrap up for a buyer. I might have, a solo exhibition a year from now that I'm just starting to do some sketches and thinking through things for.
There always is just so much, as you were saying all that. It's not like that's an exaggeration. There's a number of things on the plate to keep all the, juggling all the balls that we need to do to make this a living. So
that is literally examples pulled straight from my artist brain right now. So yes. And those of you listening, I know you get this. So before we begin our studio time, we really think slowing down and reflecting on what matters most right now for this session of your studio time can be a guidepost. It can kind of be this saving grace to help you get through your session with more clarity. So think about it. Do you have a deadline coming up for the group show that you're making work for? Are you feeling a lot of pressure or, kind of mental load from that commission that's just weighing on your shoulders? Do you have, maybe some more flexibility right now where you can work on some experimental stuff, maybe play with some new materials that you've been just, dying to get into. Really naming what matters most to you right now, today, in this session can help you know where to put your energy so you feel good and engaged with your studio time.
And when in the process should we be really thinking through this? When should we be naming what matters?
I love that. I think that's a great question, Jamie. I think naming what matters most to us in our studios is a multi-step process. This is something that we need to do many different times throughout our arc of our careers as artists, throughout our year as an artist. And then, we always advocate for quarterly check-ins with our art goals. But I think too, just pausing, for a few minutes right before you actually start your studio time that day is really helpful as well. We utilize our art and tea sessions on the network to help us connect with our goals, to help all of our community members come together on Tuesdays. And it's like, hey, here's the pause. Okay, what am I doing right now? My wheels are spinning, right? I've got so many balls in the air. That becomes sort of that centralizing point. And whether you're a community member on the Thrive Together network or not, I think just taking the time, 10 to 15 minutes out of your actual studio time before you dig into the work to do this is really important. The point is, connect your mind, connect your agenda, connect your calendar, right? All of those logistical things that kind of exist around our art careers and around the actual work we make in the studio. Take a few minutes to connect all of those dots so that you can feel really good about what you're making, how you're spending your time in the studio, and so you can stay on track with your goals.
I love that. It's just having that intention around your
Yes.
time, which I think is so important. And really, that is how that step one is really starting us off. That's in that beginning phase. And then for step two, on how to plan out your studio time, is actually to divide and conquer studio tasks. So I love this because it can really help with sorting out the steps for doing something. And so it's taking a larger project or task and then breaking it up into these smaller tasks. But then the kind of extra level is by category. And when we say category, it's sort of like, what energy does that task or group of tasks take away? Because I do think that studio time is a delicate one. We have to show up, but sometimes it can feel like I am just not in the mood for that thing. And then you can feel like you're off track from the plan and your goals. So what I love so much about thinking about this is, how do we divide and conquer and link very similar tasks? So for example, for me, planning compositions takes a lot of mental energy and a lot of thinking. And so I tend to do a lot of that planning at home on my iPad, or just sort of in these quiet moments between things, because it's not linear for me. I need to be like always revising how I'm thinking, so that when I get to the actual studio, I want to be working on my finished, precious paper drawings where I've spent my $40 on my paper. And so I will kind of group tasks that way. I'll do kind of planning in chunks, and then I'll go in for final drawings that will be much more delicate and thoughtful, but following my plan I already made. Kaylan, what does it look like for you with your practice? Because you're using lots of different materials in what you do.
Yeah, dividing and conquering is something that has really helped me because I, as you mentioned, am a mixed media artist. So I have kind of my hands in all these different processes. And I think in the past, and when I'm not being intentional with my studio time, it's very easy for me to get overwhelmed. I kind of go in there and there's like a bunch of stuff everywhere, and I just have no idea where to start. So I love this idea of dividing and conquering and being intentional with taking specific tasks one step at a time. So for me, this could look like, one day in the studio, all I'm working out is sort of color compositions and pairing fabrics together. So I'm just selecting fabrics. I'm kind of playing around with them. I'm loosely making these compositions, but I'm not actually sewing anything or piecing it together. So then my next step in the studio would be of course, doing that sewing work. And then, painting for me is part of my process, but I can't really paint on my work until some of these other steps have happened, right? And painting is a whole different thing, right? It's getting all these different materials out. It involves different sets of cleanup and tear down. So I really like this idea of picking one or two things in the process of what you make and focusing on them, because I think it helps me get into the flow a little bit better. I'm not jumping around. I know for me, I also tend to, when I get to like a sticky spot in a composition, having tons of stuff out, I don't always stay there and stay focused and like work through the problem. I just kind of distract myself with something else. I know, you've lovingly brought the word distractunities into our vocabulary, Jamie.
Yes. Well, and I just feel that it's so easy in the studio for the time to just fly. And I think there is a part about being in the mood. And so having these chunks of tasks, you can kind of get in the mood for something and focus and get into the flow a lot quicker, which is what I love that idea.
Absolutely.
And less distractions, of course. And so we're going from, we're getting ourselves in there. We're really claiming what we want to do that day. We're being intentional. We're chunking out our tasks so that we have these time blocks, basically. And then now step 3 is for how to plan out your studio time is we want to create a closing routine, which I think is unique. Like Kaylan, I know this was what you had come up with this piece because this is something I don't do well. But I think it's so important. And so spending that time at the end of your session to close it well is huge, to wrap it up. And this can be 10 minutes, it can be 20 minutes, but having a way that you can close, but then I know for me, it's like leaving it open as well to come back.
Yes.
So a 3-hour session, you have this sort of warm up happening, you have the tasks in the middle, and then you have this closing down, this close up, which I think is really interesting to think about.
And I know I've done some sports analogies on the art podcast recently, but it does remind me of my college soccer days where, you kind of have these 3 major components to a practice session, right? You always do a warm up, you start getting your muscles like loose and, you kind of do a little stretching and you do a little running. And then, the bulk of your practice time is you're dividing and conquering these tasks that you're doing as a team. You're working on passing, you're working on shooting, you're playing, whatever it is, right? And then, of course, there's always a cool down. Like every athlete knows that, we need for our body to be healthy, like we have to stretch and we have to do these different things to cool ourselves down. So I just think the whole like arc of this, it is really relatable to the artist's studio.
Well, I think that was the word I was looking for, is cool down. Like I like that. It's the warm up and the cool down. And it's such a reminder that we are human beings. We do a lot of things. Art is a very special thing we do. And it doesn't just happen. There is this warm up and cool down, this respect that we need to give ourselves, but also our art. It's very neat that we do this and that we've really continued to make art. That is a choice we've made. You don't have to do it. So it gives some reverence and respect to the work. It kind of is about creating this arc, a rhythm, a ritual. It's that feeling of this is sacred and this is something we value in our lives. So we have a way of going about it.
You're going to make me cry. Like it is.
It's the point.
It is, something that we should be respecting with proper entering and exiting rituals, right? So some things that we would recommend for your closing routine, there's lots of things that you could do, but here's some examples. You could spend a few minutes tidying up your studio and your workspace, but maybe leaving out just a little hint of something, the next thing that you're going to be working on, so it's easy to jump in at the beginning of your next session. You could prep your materials. You could do a little art reading, right? Maybe this is the time that you take 10 or 15 minutes and read a new art article or a publication. You could do some journaling about your studio time. You could write down your thoughts, write down some keywords. All of that is always helpful when we have to go pull an artist statement together. You could do some photo documenting, right? Like this could be the time that you kind of go through and take images of your work, and you kind of let that image taking be this pause rather than it feeling like this other task. It's like you stop and you look and you see what you made and you take a few images of it, you take a few videos. You could do, even some meditation, some deep breathing. Maybe you send a text to an art buddy, or, you post on the network something about how you had a great session, and you get that support back from the other artists on the Thrive Together network or from your art buddy, right? You could water your studio plants, you could stretch, so many things. I have
my poor studio plants / I don't think they're existing anymore. They could really benefit from me building in a closing routine.
Yes, save the studio plants.
Yeah, exactly.
I really think the biggest thing is that we want you to think about your whole self as an artist, and how the closing ritual specifically is about supporting your mental health, because I think what it really does is it gives you that buffer time that we've talked about in our time blocking and some of our other episodes, where we get to kind of transition out of something. We're being kind with ourselves. We're giving ourselves grace to transition. We're also saying, what I had here was enough, right? When we are like running out the door, pushing something to the last minute, going on to the next task, it's like we never stop and appreciate and say, yeah, I only had 2 hours, but that was enough. And I'm still going to take these 5 minutes and be grateful for this time. Like, it's about kind of incorporating gratitude and presence rather than just being productive and, like this crazy monster artist. That's not what we want, right?
Well, I think about for my, work we do together, at the end of the day, I'm always sort of, being like, I'm closing up, I'm looking at what I did, and then I'm making a plan for the next time. And I think for me, I get caught up in the studio time because I just am so excited. It's so precious to be there. But these things are going to add that gratitude and intentionality, which I love that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the things we've talked about, you mentioned this, but we have episode number 4 is how to time block efficiently. That's a really great episode. It parallels a lot of this. It creates this buffer time we talk about that's helped me in my regular life. But I just love that we've kind of put this on the studio time. So good job, Kaylan. This was your episode, baby. Your
Thanks,
episode,
Jamie.
baby.
Yeah.
And we're headed into art residency.
Yes,
so
it's time.
Perfect. Exactly. If you want to join us, we're starting, it's all kicking off, and there's still time to get started. It's at thrivetogethernetwork.com. And if you want to follow along on Instagram and see what other artists are doing and join in, it's Thrive Together Art Res is the hashtag. So we are so excited to see all of this amazing studio time and what comes out of that.
Yes. And whether you are joining us for the art residency and this episode was inspiration for that, or, you just needed a little reminder that your studio time is precious and deserves, to be respected. We hope this episode was inspiring to you. Feel free to leave us a review if you liked it and share it with a friend. As always, we are here for you. We are cheering you on. And Jamie and I so believe in the work that you are doing as thriving artists.